is that's HJ. He's also a board member. Ian, board member. Meta is I know the rest of the crew. Okay.
Yeah. All right, we're streaming now.
Hey, Greg.
Hey there. Is that John West?
It is. Hello.
Hi, John. Here, let me turn my camera on for a second. All right. Let's see. We also have Deanna on. We have Chris from Life ID and Lawrence. We have HJ. Good to see you, HJ. And Patrick. Cody. Awesome. Maybe we can get an update on the developer conference from you today.
I see Michael Berg.
Yeah, absolutely. Whenever you want.
Okay. So it looks like we have a quorum, and it is 11:01. Let's go ahead and get started. We have an enormous amount of stuff to get through today. As usual, I really would like to begin with the technical updates. So Meta, let's turn it over to you.
Okay, great. Good morning, everyone. Here to present the technical update for RChain. So we are in full force preparing for our 3/29 releases. We have 2 releases that we are going to drop. One of them is the independent storage tier. That is a release we've been talking about for quite some time, and we've had some challenges in cutting that release, but I'm happy to report that we are on track to drop a version of the RChain storage layer as an independent library. We will be doing a demonstration of that functionality at the next community hangout. And we're also dropping a new node. The end of March node will have 2 modes in which it will operate. One mode will be in the traditional node mode that we're familiar with, where it connects to a bunch of peers on the network. The other mode will be where you can write and run rolling contracts. And the contracts, it'll be very similar to the January 31st SDK release, but these will all be pre-production components, right? So it will have the final version of the storage layer. Well, not the final version, but the current version of the storage layer. It will also be integrated into the same package as the node. The difference being is that we wanted to make sure that the console would either display the node connectivity messages or a REPL that will allow users to interact with rolling contracts that are running. So we decided that we would just operate in 2 modes. This particular node will not support sending messages over the network. That is our April release, which I'll be talking about later as we get closer to that. So still a month away from sending rolling messages over the wire, but we are making great progress towards that goal. And if you read the roadmap, you'll see how we get from here to there, right? Our progression as we add new features. So we're doing some planning and specifying for that April release. There's some plumbing and piping that needs to be put in place in order to support rolling messages over the network. That specifying is being done in our wiki. So feel free to take a look at that documentation if you wish. It's called the Node Powerbox. We also have named our node. We've named it R node. R as an RChain, R node. And the community came back and told us that they liked the name R space for the storage tier. So I'm going to be working with the marketing folks. Lawrence, I sent you a note to see if that name works for you, and we can proceed or not if you have another suggestion with that name, but that's the community spoke. So thank you for that feedback. We also have our developer retreat. I want to kind of plug that again. Cody will talk about that later, but that's April 17th and 18th in Boulder, Colorado. We will be talking in detail about the architecture as well as the roadmap to Mercury. And the agenda is set. That's published on the developer.coop, developer.rchain.coop website. So please go take a look. On the compiler team, so I'll go into the detailed components and their status. The compiler team is really focused on the 329 delivery with the evaluator getting integrated with the tuple space, being integrated with the REPL. So it's a fully functioning component. We're doing documentation. The functionality that will be supported will be similar to the rolling SDK we released at the end of January. So the tutorial will be getting some small modifications to reflect what has been tested to be working with the interpreter. We have implemented de Brown indices as well, so that's going to really improve the matching capabilities. It was something we wanted to do anyway in the compiler, so we just pulled it forward into the current milestone. We also are making really good progress on coming to an agreement around the namespace sharding proposal and the RChain state documents. We had more meetings this week. We have recorded those meetings, so the namespace discussion is actually recorded. It's already on YouTube. Greg, I need that link from you. I'm sure Zoom Cloud is done for processing that. So if you could send me a link, I'll get that pushed to YouTube as well.
Yeah, I'll send that a little bit later. There was a snafu because we were just over my limit, so I have to pay for more space.
I'm going to just ask to host these meetings because I can just do them on my computer, do the processing on my machine. Yeah. Next up, the Node team. They are making good progress. Storage is continuing to make sure that they have storage has all the dependencies mapped out and considered for what the interpreter needs in order to store the row line continuations. And then we've also got some work we're doing around public and private key generation on Node standup. So, and we're working on implementing storing of keys and streamlining the handshake process with previously known nodes. So, really good work on the startup and forming of the peer-to-peer network and that node-to-node communication. The Rosette team, we've been focusing a lot on the virtual machine because that timeline is kind of stretching out on us. We're looking at breaking out the RBL compiler from the C++ Rosette codebase. And we've started doing some tests around that. And we've discovered that we can force it into doing a late lookup, but then we need more information in the virtual machine environment. So there's some further work that needs to be done on the compiler side. So we need to make some modifications to the C++ compiler portion where more of the information is exported so that it's available to the VM runtime environment. So that work is ongoing. We made some good progress on opcodes. Community member Abner has given us a couple more pull requests on opcodes, so we're really excited about that. I'm hoping Abner can do a video for us and just talk a little bit about himself and how he's enjoying the bounty program. So I'm going to hit him up for that after we're done with this call. And the website we updated to include the developer retreat agenda. So go check out developer.rchain.coop. If you have technical questions, please post them on the forum there because there's a little bit more persistence with the Q&A, and other members can then hopefully get their technical questions answered via the forum instead of posting them again in Discord. So we just find that it's a little bit more productive in the grand scheme of things for people to get answers to technical questions. That's it for my update. I will open it up to questions.
Hey, Meta, it's Ed. Great update. Congratulations on the progress for you and the team. Really happy seeing things moving forward. Just a quick question. We were talking a couple weeks ago about content delivery network and content delivery more generally. What's the current plan for, from an applications perspective, storing content on RChain in Mercury?
Yeah, so I followed up after our discussion. I followed up with Greg, and so a couple of things. One, Resonate, as far as I know, and I'm going to paraphrase Greg here, is going to be using off-chain storage for the initial portion of their, as they initially onboard onto RChain. So they won't immediately be pushing their content onto the blockchain. They will be using it more as an index, and then using the RChain blockchain mostly to handle the delivery of the network of the content from off-chain and handling all the payment processing. So that's their initial go to RChain strategy. In my conversations with Greg, Greg did agree that it would be the content would be stored on the nodes, providing the redundancy for the content delivery network. And I think what will have to happen is that we'll have to have a specific namespace or shard whose focus would be storage of content, right? So these nodes would be optimized for content delivery and storage. So it flows with what you were talking about, that the content would in fact potentially be stored on n number of nodes. We haven't really talked much about potentially sharding the content or having a proof of storage or something like that, but doesn't feel like we have to worry too aggressively about that for the Mercury timeframe. I don't know if I answered your question, but I think I did.
You did.
Okay.
And let me just summarize with the other bit of information we talked about, which was, I think that means that in a normal smart contract, up to perhaps 8 gig of storage could be stored because of the practical limits of what's in memory, and that more storage is not a hard requirement for Mercury.
I haven't gotten into the specificity.
No, I mean, you can definitely store and access a lot more than 8 gig. It's
in
just
that contract?
within a single contract, yeah, because the contract can hold like lots and lots and lots of names, right? And the names are the way you store and access content. What the real issue is how what you want to do is you want to extend the matching so that the matching gives you a more refined query mechanism, and that's what. So essentially, what you have poor man's matching and query in the Mercury release, but it needs to be more refined as we start to talk about content delivery at the application level. Does that make sense?
Yes. Thanks for the update.
Cool.
Terrific. Any other questions? Thanks, Greg, for helping out there.
No worries. That was all great.
Fantastic. Thank you.
So, Greg, during our meeting, you asked me to talk about the sharding stuff. Is that going to happen later, or?
No, I think now you read my mind. I was just about to call for this. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then let me share my screen here. Great. So there's this page on the core wiki. It's called Power Set Shards, if anyone wants to look at it. At the top, it says it's one of several competing proposals. This is the one that we have pretty much agreed on for Mercury. Some introductory concepts. A validator is a participant in the Casper protocol. Casper requires each validator to know what the entire set of validators is, so we call that set V. Then we assume a non-empty set of regions. Now, these regions should be thought of as either geographical or anyway, sets of criteria that a validator has to have. So performance criteria, how much storage, the service level agreement that a validator has to subscribe to. And if they fail to meet that agreement, they'll get slashed. There's a function little v from the set of regions to non-empty subsets of validators. So every region has to have some validators in it. Namespaces are generated by taking subsets of the set of regions, non-empty subsets of the set of regions. So there's a lattice of namespaces generated by the regions. For each namespace, we assign a countably infinite set of names for that namespace. Each namespace is disjoint from all the others. So S join T does not contain names in S nor contain names in T. It is a separate namespace with its own set of names. That said, the validators for the namespace S join T are the validators for S union the validators for T. So the validators in S have to validate the namespace S, the namespace S join T, the namespace S join U, and so on, and the namespace S join T join U, and so on, all the way up to the top of the lattice. So they have to validate any namespace where the region name shows up in the namespace name. Once these namespaces are formed, the execution of contracts within them may be slower than you'd expect for S, for instance. To be in the region S, you may have to commit to a very stringent set of criteria, a stringent service level agreement, whereas for T, it's much lower. Therefore, S join T has to take the minimum of the constraints, just by the fact that it includes T. Terms are colored with a namespace. So I'm going to go through here and talk about the different kinds of terms. Input expressions are associated with the namespace of the names that the input expression is listening on. So in this case down here, we have 4A from B. Little b is in the namespace big B. So therefore, this code is running in big B. Cross namespace joins are forbidden. So S cannot join on, a process running in S cannot join on a name from S and a name from T. If S and T want to communicate, they have to run code in the S join T namespace and then do joins there. Sorry about the unfortunate collision of jargon. One is the lattice join, whereas the other is the input join.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Outputs similarly run in the namespace of the name that they're being sent on. So because this is listening on little b and this is sending on little b, both of these are running in the same namespace. Whereas over here, this is listening on little y, therefore it's running in the namespace big Y. Now, I'll just move on. Well, let's see here. Before I move on, new productions annotate their names with the namespace, so you know where the listening and sending processes should live. And other productions, such as evaluation, live in the nearest and closing input until they're evaluated. Also, public names like @1 have to be annotated with an explicit namespace. So there is no name @1. There's name @1 : B, and there's name @1 : Y, and so on for the different regions. For mobility, here we've got these two running in the same namespace, big B, and here we've got a separate one running in the namespace big Y. When this send synchronizes with this receive, this process here, A, gets replaced by Y. Now this reduction occurred in the namespace B, so this Y bang has to be sent over to big Y to know, for the process to continue. Similarly, here we have an input and a send. When they synchronize, it reduces to this one that is listening on little y, so this has to be sent over to big Y. Now, in order to be sure that this proposed synchronization is accepted, big Y needs to wait until it has received enough messages from validators in big B that it can be sure it won't roll back the transfer. That's a slightly weaker condition than B having finalized on the synchronization, but they're very similar. There's only a subtle difference between those. So you can think of B finalizing on the fact that this needs to go to Y before sending it over. Joins between names that are not in the same namespace is a type error. If a process in the namespace B and one in Y wish to race, then they need to send messages to a process in the namespace B join Y. Now there's a scenario where there's a process B going on and a process in Y going on, and neither one knows about the other, but there's a third party that wants to race messages from both of those. The only way that's possible is by forwarding messages, that the third party consumes the messages from B and Y and then forwards them to B join Y. That does not preserve the semantics of a cross namespace join, but that is the best you can do. We've chosen this because of denial of service attacks or resource exhaustion attacks that take place, or at least that are possible when using merge blocks across namespaces. So this is the best that we've been able to come up with so far. This will not continue into Venus. We'll have a much finer grained notion of region that is based around behavioral types and some other things. But this is what will be in Mercury. The way this interacts with Rev and wallets and purses and so forth hasn't been written up yet. We just talked about it on Monday. It should be ready for the Casper meeting on next Monday. We have introduced a distinction of terminology. There are coin purses that are the things that actually store the monetary value, store the rev. And then there are wallets, which are wrappers around purses. They contain these coin purses. And these wallets listen on public channels for cryptographically signed messages and then forward those messages to the contained purse. So the purses themselves only use unforgeable names, whereas the wallets have these public names and rely on cryptography for their security. The way money gets transferred is that coin purses can spawn a new purse containing a portion of the value, then complete control over that purse is handed over to the other party. They can withdraw the money from that and transfer it into their own. If anyone's interested in the details of how the purse works, Michael Birch has some code that does that. Also, if you look at Mark Miller's work on E, there's a mint and a purse pattern. E itself isn't very widely known, but it reads rather like Python, so it shouldn't be terribly difficult to understand. Anyway, look forward to a write-up on this. Does anyone have questions?
Not a question, but I thought it was a particularly clear presentation, and I appreciate you taking the time to do that. I was very encouraged yesterday when we were able to get consensus on, or more or less consensus on both proposals, the state and purse stuff, as well as the namespace and sharding. So I felt like those were some sticky points with respect to our process, but it seems we've made forward progress. So I was very, very happy about that.
Yeah, this has been a long time coming because we've had so many competing notions of namespace and region and join blocks and how it all interacts with Casper and then how the money interacts with Casper. There have been lots of details, lots of security analyses that we've gone through. So we're glad to have finally come to consensus on how we're going to move forward with it.
Yeah.
All right. Any other comments?
Mike, this is Navneet. A question about the union you mentioned, S and T. How the union between S and T is going to form the namespace?
Okay, so there are two different notions of a union of S and T. There are the regions S and T, and then there are namespaces S, T, and S join T. And then there is the set of validators assigned to the region, S, and the set of validators assigned to the region T, and the union of those sets of validators. So there are a bunch of different concepts in play here, the regions, the validators, and the namespaces. Can you clarify what exactly your question is in terms of those three concepts?
So conceptually, what I was asking for when you define these unions for namespace, for example, I have a region and I created a namespace within it. And
no,
okay.
A region itself is a collection of validators. The set of namespaces is the lattice of joins of the regions. You cannot create a namespace within a region. There is a set of namespaces that is generated from the set of regions.
So how do you add private namespaces in that case? I mean, at this moment, I'm kind of confused with the hierarchy. Is there any hierarchy or not? Or it's just a mesh or grid kind of formation? You have one namespace.
Do you understand what a lattice is?
Can you elaborate more on that one?
A lattice is a mathematical structure that has, well, in this case, a complete lattice. It has a top element, a bottom element, and given any two elements, there is both a meet element and a join element. You can think of a lattice as representing subsets of a set. So if you have a set R, in this case, the set of regions, there is the empty set. There are the one element sets containing a single region from R. And then there are all of the other subsets that have multiple regions in them. The bottom element of this lattice is the empty set. The top element is all of R. And the ones in between are various subsets of R. The meet is the intersection, the join is the union. That is a lattice. The namespaces are the elements of the lattice, that is, subsets of R.
Okay.
There has been talk about private namespaces. Private namespaces is kind of an ambiguous term. So what intent did you have for the use of a private namespace? What did you intend to do with a private namespace?
The way we are describing a namespace, private namespace is equivalent to a blockchain. Right. The way I define it, private namespace is only I am involved with that namespace, or the nodes I am running with the particular namespace or the private namespace. I can only connect on my node, or I sort of know the nodes working on that particular namespace.
So the simplest version of that is that you've got a completely different set of validators, bonded validators with their own Genesis block. That would be a private version of RChain.
Yes, you can run your own version of RChain. But that would not be a private namespace in the public version of RChain.
Right, and it couldn't use Rev, therefore, correct?
No, it
would use its own version of Rev.
Exactly.
Right. So if you're creating a Genesis block, that means your version of Rev, right?
Yes. Now that said, each namespace is pretty much its own blockchain. Each namespace keeps track of the current state of terms that are colored in that way. So for example, in the namespace B, it has this as its state. And they come to agreement if there were race conditions going on names in big B, it would be the validators in the region B that would agree on which ones win the race. So each namespace includes some set of validators built out of the validators for each region. And those validators are running a blockchain in that namespace. And then coming to agreement on who the winners of races are, and coming to agreement on when to send messages to some other namespace, some other blockchain, to continue the execution of code between these chains.
So yeah, it really what it comes down to is, what is your notion of privacy here? If privacy means nobody can see or interact with you, which is one very extreme notion of privacy, then you then your own sort of Genesis block is what's required. If privacy means there are more nuanced notions of privacy. For example, we do have the new operator in Rolang, so you could have a bunch of names that are privately generated within a particular namespace, and they're only known by a society of contracts that are all communicating with each other. So that's one approach to privacy that's different. They can still interact with Rev, but now you've got some contracts that are effectively in charge of doling out names within that private namespace. So it becomes a more centralized solution. It really depends on what you mean by private.
I think from private sense point of view, I think I get it. If I'm running my own, if I create my own regions, and within the regions, if I have subset as a namespace, it's going to be private. So the question is coming from the union, the way Mike described early on. If you have these subsets within the region, and these validators are part of the regions, and it's mean one validator is participating in more than one namespace to validate the transactions. And that's where my union, question for union was that if a validator is part of the regions and he is participating, validating multiple namespaces, is that the correct statement first? And then if there's a union, how we are separating those namespaces, and how union helps these namespaces.
The real issue here is that in order to not have double spend, your notion of privacy must be mitigated in some way. So as you shard, validators that are participating in one region, they have to validate all the way up. Otherwise, you have this possibility of double spend, right? Because you don't have validators aware of transactions that cross those regions.
So there's no notion of creating a private region. All the regions and all the validators are known at the time of the Genesis block. Now, there is some, we haven't worked out the details of whether new regions are going to be allowed to be created in Mercury. I think that's certainly possible. We can also close down regions where no contracts are running. But at any point in time, all validators agree on what the set of regions is and what the validators are in every region. So if your notion of privacy means that no one else gets to see what your validators are, that means you're not participating in the same Casper protocol with everything else.
Exactly. Yeah, that's precisely what I was trying to say. So you have to get really clear on what your notion of privacy is, and then we can figure out whether or not it's supportable within this framework, or the extent to which it's supported. So I really appreciate the conversation. I want to have more of these kinds of conversations, but we also have a lot of other stuff to get through. So unless there are any objections, I'm going to move on because we need updates from. So there are at least 3 other things that are on the agenda. One is we need updates from Pythia and Reflective, and then Life ID has also requested some time to present what they're doing, since they're one of the signed companies at Pythia. So if we could take things in that order, I would be very appreciative. Is that okay with with everyone here?
Sounds good.
Okay, why don't we do Reflective and then Pythia and then Life ID? Does that work?
Sure.
Awesome.
Hey guys, hey Greg, hey everybody. It's Greg Heuss from Reflective. So I'll try to jump through this as quick as I can here. Let's see, updates from last week. We sent over, as we sort of described to the community how we do this, 12 separate deals that we're in the diligence phase of right now, and that's as of last week. We sent those summaries over to Greg and Kenny, who, as everybody knows, is on the deal committee. We've got, the goal is to probably get 4 to 6 of those done in the next week and a half. So I'm shooting for April 1 to have half of those done. And that's the goal there. And of those 12 deals that we sent over, I can't give you specifics on the names of who they are, but I can tell you a little bit about them. They range everywhere from spot insurance. There's a mesh network play in there. There's an accounting tool for crypto. Think of QuickBooks kind of thing for businesses that are working on crypto and accounting practices, which if you've had to deal with that on your own personal time, let alone in a business, that's a nightmare. So we're really excited about that one. There is a communication tool for communities and companies that's using AI and voice and recognition. There's an IoT and a wearable play, fintech, and sort of underbanked communities we're talking about. There's 2 of those companies we're talking about are out of Africa. So some pretty exciting plays there. There's a protocol.
Hey, Greg, this is Rob Bunsen from Digital Town. I'm actually going to be in Africa tomorrow, North Africa. Whereabouts in Africa?
We've got one in Kenya. I think both of them may be in Kenya. And Kevin and Lee, you can jump in here. I think they're your deals, but I believe they're in Kenya.
Okay.
One's in Ghana and one's in Kenya.
Okay, sorry. Ghana and Kenya. Let's see. We've got protocols for, one's pretty interesting on global impact and optimizing that via sort of sustainability and developmental goals for underprivileged countries. So that one's cool. We've got one that's a news content play that's trying to pull the truth and reliability out of news and content. That one's exciting and something I think is pretty timely in what we need, and the way that they're using the blockchain's very unique in how we're doing that. So that's a few of the examples of what we're doing. I would encourage everybody now, it feels like on the Discord channel, with Pythia now has their own channel, Reflective has one. We're going to be posting a lot of this on the Reflective channel, so you can come in there and check that out. Certainly updates and things that we have for that will be very current, and we'll be keeping that up to date. One of the other things I wanted to update based on our conversations from the last call was sort of this whole letting the community be more involved in the diligence and the deal selection that we are actually investing in. So we're loosely terming it as a deal day, and we're looking at doing it at least quarterly. If it goes really well, maybe we can drop it into monthly. We would do that out of our Seattle office and, of course, live stream it. It would be similar to if any of you have participated in an angel network type of deal flow where you see and hear 10 to 12 different companies. I would like those companies to be sourced by and through the community. They would each go through a 10 or 15-minute presentation. The community would act as the diligence audience to take them through that. The community would also see how we work as Reflective and those questions we asked. And then those companies would be pushed forward with a yay or nay based on the community and how we feel about them. And I think it's important to get the RChain community involved in this to see how we're doing it. So there's a couple of questions that came to me last night based on the differences between Pythia after Lawrence gave his talk and what we're doing. So this is one of those that we're trying to get the community more involved in this and how they sort of select the deals, because after all, this fund is coming from co-op. They are the recipient of 80% of everything that comes back. So it's very important that we see how that works and how that plays with the community itself. Another thing that's a little bit different that somebody was asking about, how are we going to report back to the community? This is one way of doing that. And of course, we have in our bylaws, in our agreement with the co-op, that we're going to report quarterly. So there will be a report coming out at the middle part of April for this first quarter. Even though we didn't technically start till the end of January, we'll do one to keep it very transparent with the community. Again, one of the things that we're doing here at Reflective. For the developer conference, we're pretty excited. Nash and Meta and some of the other folks on that side, we've been in conversations with you. We've got, I'm going to say, at least 20 different developers are coming out representing. I mean, the invite's out to probably a dozen different companies, probably 2 people from each one. So we could end up with a few more, but we put a deadline to those companies. So if any of them are on the line right now, the deadline is Monday evening, so that we can get to Nash and the crew exactly how many folks we're going to have there at the developer conference that are actually working with Reflective and going to be building dApps to put onto the system. One last thing, I'm sure there's a ton more, but we did get an office in New York. A third of our team with John and Renal and Kevin are in New York, so they've opened a space. It's going to be open in April 1, I believe, is the date that they're going to start. So they're going to be working out of that. And we just feel it's so important with so much deal flow coming through New York. And we've also got news that we'll be talking about probably next week about the Bay Area and San Francisco and how we're moving into that space as well. That's what I've got.
I just want to piggyback on one thing Greg H said, which is we're very committed to transparency. And I think I can also speak somewhat for Pythia as well. I was really impressed with Ed on the call yesterday, because there are a lot of questions really jamming for really specific details. But what's really important to both Pythia and both Reflective is getting these deals done, getting excited dApps built on the network. And there's a certain amount of transparency that would make entrepreneurs' IP attacked or things like that, that VCs don't normally do. So I could say I think both are very committed to transparency, but it's important that the community understand that, one, we're trying to make more transparency, but there are certain limits and there are certain lines that need to be respected to allow both Pythia and Reflective to do their jobs properly.
Well, I have to say this just warms my heart. This is just fantastic. I'm really, really excited. To have the community, sourcing and doing diligence on projects that ultimately get funded, I think is a fantastic way to do things. Congratulations. Really, really, very, very well done. Awesome. If there are no more questions for Reflective, we can move it over to Pythia and then give the floor to Chris Bosco.
Fantastic, thanks. I'm going to keep mine short because we've got 2 companies presenting, both Chris and Rob Monster from Digital Town. You heard a lot from me yesterday about where we are, where we're going. We've uncovered a lot of things. There is a Discord channel now for Pythia, so highlights there include a careers page. So if you know people are looking, if people in the community are looking for new opportunities, you'll see those from us. The identity working group is up and running. There is the full charter, which is open to the community. In essence, to steal something from Greg, we're creating abundance. The working group is going to produce all kinds of IP that's going to be released and protocols and standards for people to look at, like the Internet Engineering Task Force. And if people see ideas that say, wow, this is great, we don't have a standard for this, we can build this, that opportunity really exists. We are, and we've been approached by the state to help with different, state of Washington, with different initiatives. So just anything that raises the profile for us, and as well as obviously the co-op and everything we're doing with RChain, because I get a lot of requests for that, I'm pushing that out. So I'm going to stop there. Hit me up on Discord, call me, email me. You'll see more and more of the different kinds of companies, but I want to turn it over, as Greg said, to Chris Boscolo and then to Rob to talk about their companies and some abundance for the community.
Hey everyone, can you hear me?
Yes.
Awesome. So it's actually the first time I've used Zoom for a presentation like this, so apologize on any of the hiccups that I unintentionally do. But I wanted to introduce LifeID. First of all, as those of you that are investors in the room, you know you invest in people, not ideas. So it was really important that you guys get to introduce the team that you invested in. So this is the LifeID team. We're at WeWork in Bellevue, which incidentally, we host the RChain meetup on the first Tuesday of every month. So really encourage everyone in the community to, if you can make it to that, come to that. So given our time constraint, I'm gonna pop into the presentation really quickly. And I'm going to skip through most of it. But what I want to offer is that we do a more in-depth LifeID presentations for those that are interested. So let me know if you guys can see this.
Yeah, we see it.
Cool. Okay. So again, introduce the team. My name's Chris Boscolo. I think I met most of you at the Governance Forum, or many of you, I should say, at the Governance Forum. On Discord, I'm Crispy. LifeID was actually founded 2017 by myself. The idea originated about 3 years ago, in fact. And I'm not going to walk through the journey of how we got to the sort of the core reasons of why we decided to build LifeID, but the highlights are physical identity was a pain in the butt. I wanted to reduce this down to smartphone apps and build a technology that lets put every single identity they have into a smartphone. As you guys all know, passwords are a wretched way to do authentication. Just double check here. Can you guys see the presentation instead of me?
Yeah, I see it.
Yeah, okay, cool. And so, and there's many examples of why passwords suck, and I don't want to spend too much time on it, but you guys know they do. Finally, though, the way we transact identity in the digital world is flawed. And it's really, if you think about it, it's kind of bizarre. In order to prove to some organization who we are, we hand them over a bunch of private information about us. They then go check it in a database that they don't own and you don't own to verify whether that information was valid or not. So we believe there's got to be a better way. And the better way is kind of challenging us. What we wanted to do was build a solution that has the convenience of a centralized service, kind of like that login with Facebook or login with Google button, but with the ability to preserve the privacy and allow the identity holders to have the control. And so what we're building is an open source, permissionless, blockchain-based identity platform, acting as the identity layer for all the applications that want to offer this convenience and security and privacy-enhanced identity interactions to the world. So it's a blockchain platform plus a very good user experience for the users to interact both in the digital and the physical world. The intention for this platform is it will be open source, and it will be open and permissionless. And this is super critical. The reason is it has to be open and permissionless is for users to have control of their identity. And by the way, this is a term, I'm sure you guys have heard it before. It's called self-sovereign identity. We're following the self-sovereign identity standards that are being developed by DIF and the W3C. So it'll utilize open protocols, but as well as the openness of the protocols and the software being open source, it's really critical that the platform that we use to coordinate the use of these identities also be permissionless. Otherwise, it's vulnerable to censorship and account revocation by a third party instead of the identity holder. So that's what we're building. We are super excited about that. As part of our platform technology, we're also building out an ecosystem partnerships for other people to build on this platform. The intention is that it's an open platform. It won't be owned and controlled by Life ID. It'll be owned and controlled by the community of identity holders, making it attractive for companies to want to build their identity solutions on top of this platform, because there's no brand lockouts happening for any of these companies. Any questions before I move on to the details of the partnership?
Yeah, I have one. I mean, I love openness. I love all of your goals. They sometimes are in tension with the click-to-pay event. What are the click-to-pay events? When do I pay, and what motivates me to pay?
Yeah, that's a great question. And so in most, it depends on the situation of what we're talking about when you're using your identity. For most websites, the act of creating an identity or an account on that website is paid for by the web property. So the model we're shooting for is that that's who pays for that, not the end user. But what's really critical is that for you to have anonymity across all these sites, you're creating unique identifiers for each one of them. So the intention is that although they're paying, you still get a unique identifier for use at that site. And that's just in that particular use case. Does that answer your question, Greg?
It does. I understand. Thank you.
Cool. Any other questions? So again, we are very, very excited about the partnership and the seed investment from Pythia and just general interaction with RChain and the co-op. So I personally will be at the developer retreat that's in April, and I think one other member of my team is going to be there as well. You'll get a lot of push from our team on. I already put this in Discord, but issues surrounding zero knowledge proof and privacy are very important to us. So to the extent that RChain can support those out of the gate, we love it and want it. And then the other part of it is because our platform is tokenized, and because of the way that the token is used to incentivize the participation of the identity bridges and the relays between the web and the blockchain, we have the other problem, which is we need to ensure that there's some mechanism for these transactions to be paid for in the token that is specific to that application. So those are two of the topics that I threw out in Discord and hope to dig deep on at our next at the dev retreat if we can. We see this as really strategic because we will be providing or building an identity layer that others will be able to use, and it will be on the RChain platform when Mercury goes live. So that's very exciting. It's also very exciting for us because we're currently prototyping all of this on Ethereum, and as you guys already know, there's some problems both with scale and cost on Ethereum, and we're excited to be able to actually deliver world scale where every single, if you think about it, 7+ billion people on Earth, for every one of them to have an identity that's blockchain backed, we need RChain's scale capability. So we're excited to be working on this platform. With that, as part of our the partnership with you guys, we're also going to be doing a token sale, and I'm super pleased to announce. By the way, I put this in quotes because it came straight from my attorney. Because as you guys all know, the legal framework around token sales is dubious. So, at any rate, I'm super pleased that we want to extend an offer for the RChain co-op members, those that are accredited investors, to participate in this token sale for our discounted round. So I'm super excited to talk about that. Okay, I'm going to leave it at that. But what I want to offer is a time slot that if people are interested, where we can do a more in-depth presentation about Life ID, how we got here, and our technology and where we're headed. I would love to do that.
This is awesome. Thank you very much, Chris. I really appreciate this, and I am looking forward to having a deeper dive with you.
Cool.
Every time you present, I get more intrigued. So this is good stuff. Really appreciate it.
Awesome. Thank you.
Any other questions for the
do the presentation for Digital Town? I think we'll also need to follow up as well.
Yep.
Yeah.
So unless there's any further questions to Chris, let's turn it over to Rob.
Yeah. Okay. Hey guys, Rob Monster here. Yeah, Digital Town is a project that kicked off about 2 years ago. The basic premise of Digital Town is that we can create a global network of thriving, sovereign, local economies where effectively every city, town, or village is capable of becoming its own Google, Amazon, Expedia, OpenTable, Airbnb, PayPal, and Coinbase, all branded in the identity of the city and working on web and mobile and interoperable between cities. Single sign-on for the world, executed practically in the form of a federation of citizens using smart wallets connected to the services of smart cities, both the public sector and the private sector, and made intuitively navigable through the notion of a smart web. Let me break that down. The citizens get a smart wallet. It is essentially providing a framework for being able to use both conventional currency and a range of cryptocurrencies to do payments, including micropayments. The notion of smart cities that many cities are trying to implement, but really lacking an operating system for being able to practically bundle both the services of the public sector and the private sector. And then this notion of a smart web. The smart web essentially uses the new domain extensions like .city to make the navigation of finding the services from the public sector and the private sector intuitive, personalized, and more secure. So I'm going to share my screen just to kind of put a little bit of context here to show you an example of one of the different cities that is live, which is London. I'm actually in London today. We hosted an event at the US Embassy. We hosted an event with a number of dignitaries from across the UK. Essentially, as I said, the city becomes its own Google, Amazon, OpenTable, PayPal, and Coinbase all in one. And I'll just show you how that looks. So the ability to do generic searches like a search engine, but also the ability to find local lodging options, and you can book directly with these different lodging options, including peer-to-peer short-term rentals, dining, the ability to book a table. The thesis is that every restaurant should be able to allow you to do online table reservations. The marginal cost of doing a table reservation is effectively zero. You can search down to the level of individual menu items or by cuisine. And retail, including the ability to allow parties to sell both new and used goods, services, appointment bookings, and so forth and so on. Now, what I think is kind of interesting from a blockchain standpoint is what we're doing in the area of so-called city shares. So city shares is essentially a blockchain Ethereum smart contract that is designed to basically tokenize the asset that is called the Digital Town. So, for example, we're live in Austin, Texas, which was displayed at South by last week. We had a capacity audience at our presentation last Monday. Mike Cartwright, the CTO, who's here on the call, was one of the presenters. this particular asset was tokenized at the valuation of $3.2 million and then sold to the citizens. Yeah, sold to the citizens through the issuance of so-called city shares. And I'll show you what that looks like. So in the smart wallet, you actually have the ability to see your holdings for city shares. And you can see how you can manage your portfolio of city shares like so, and be able to also buy and sell these city shares as a private peer-to-peer transaction. So effectively allowing parties who wish to trade in and out of their positions holding city shares as a way to create aligned incentive for parties who wish to hold ownership stake in this platform cooperative, which is effectively what each of these digital towns is. So that's just a very super high level of what the platform is. It is possible for businesses to be able to set up storefronts. We've acquired actually 7 companies over the course of the last 2 years. So you actually have the ability to manage a variety of business types, retail services, dining, lodging, all natively within the application, and all accessible through the smart wallet for the purposes of being able to make payments. And we have a full API. The platform is designed to make it easy for bespoke applications to be built on top of this operating system. And Mike Cartwright is actually met with Life ID, and we're also exploring about the possibility of using Life ID as a single sign-on. So that's a high-level overview of what we're doing with Digital Town. I think we'll see some interesting adoption of it in some of the lead markets, and the first paying cities now in the UK, India, Brazil, and across the USA are coming online. So stay tuned.
Thank you very much, Rob. I want to go deeper in terms of how you plan to use RChain, but I actually have to jump over to another meeting. So maybe we can set up some time to talk a little bit about how you envision the use of RChain.
Yeah, we're using Ethereum smart contracts now, and Mike's on the call and has already been exploring about RChain. And so what we like about it, of course, is massive scalability. I think the volume of transactions that are being contemplated and the range of use cases that we want to migrate to blockchain are of an order of magnitude that I think really warrant the RChain promise of throughput.
Fantastic. I really appreciate that. We barely had any time to give any more updates. We're already over time, and I have to jump off to another meeting. But thanks again to everyone for coming, and looking forward to next week where we'll have even more updates. This train is barreling down the tracks. All right, so talk to you guys next week.
Great. Thanks, guys.